To mislead, this is all you need. Be your everything, and I'll be your everything. Still too soon to feel, please just say it's real. More than just a thrill, not just in it for the thrill. I'm in it for the love, cause love it needs to touch it. You're pressing on my body, babe, let me tell you something. I'm in it for the love, cause love it needs to touch it. You're pressing on my body, babe, let me tell you something. For the love, I'm in it for the love. I'm in it for the love. I'm in it for the love. For the love. I'm in it for the love. I'm in it for the low, you can let me know. You know I will show. Now we're sipping the Bordeaux, with you through it all, winter through the fall. You just make the call. Yeah, I'm in it for it all. I'm in it for the love, cause love it needs to touch it. You're pressing on my body, babe, let me tell you something. I'm in it for the love, cause love it needs to touch it. You're pressing on my body, babe, let me tell you something. I'm in it for the love. 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 For the love. has no patience. Look at his face and in his eyes. He's been way bound to the die. Always taking chances, all those conversations. Don't know if I'll make it, don't know why he even tries. Say, oh, I am a believer. Oh, don't know how I'll be if I'm not free to take a lead. Oh, I am a believer. Oh, ground beneath my feet, but I don't flee cause I believe. I'll stay down to the ground. Stay down to the ground. Stay down to the ground, 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 ground. Stay down to the dancing, oh dancing, oh dancing, they all make oh dancing, oh make oh dancing, oh dancing, oh dancing, they all make oh dancing. Stay down to the dancing, 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 they all dancing, all dancing, dancing, they all make stay down to the ground. Say, oh, I am a believer. Oh, don't know how I'll be if I'm not free to take a lead. Oh, I am a believer. Oh, ground beneath my feet, but I don't flee cause I believe. I'll stay down to the ground. Stay down to the ground. Stay down to the ground, 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 ground. Stay down to the dancing, oh dancing, oh dancing, they all make oh dancing, oh make oh dancing, oh dancing, oh dancing, they all make oh dancing. Stay down to the dancing, 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 they all dancing, all dancing, dancing, they all make say, oh, I am a believer. Oh, don't know how I'll be if I'm not free to take a lead. Oh, I am a believer. Oh, ground beneath my feet, but I don't flee cause I believe. Say, oh, I am a believer.
drops and raindrops. Motion got me all faded. My heart got me going all crazy, and I won't be walking away, yeah. I'm a fool, yeah, I got love blind. And ooh, yeah, got my heart out, and it's covered in gold, like moonlight over Hollywood. And it's cool, yeah, cause you know it's good, oh baby.
guy who could treat me right. Way oh, way oh, oh. Boy, take a chance, will you let me ride? Way oh, way oh, oh. best thing in your life. Way oh, way oh, oh. You got me singing. Way oh, way oh, oh. You look like a guy who could treat me right. Way oh, oh. Boy, take a chance, will you let me ride? Way oh, oh. I could be the best thing in your life. Way oh. Maybe let's take a drive, take a drive. Way oh, oh, oh. Way oh, oh. Way oh, oh. Way oh, oh. Way oh, you got me singing. You look like a guy who could treat me right. Boy, take a chance, will you let me ride? I could be the best thing in your life. Maybe let's take a drive, take a drive. Way oh, oh. 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 Way oh, Boy, take a chance, will you let me ride? I could be the best thing in your life. Baby, let's take a drive, take a drive.